Clayton, tell us a little bit about why you're diving back into politics and seeking this office right now.
Yeah, a lot of people are asking me that. Said, Clayton, you did your time on city council and did a good job, held up conservative values on the city council, and got a lot of good things done. And there's something driving me. It's an inner drive, I guess. Something is pushing me towards this, and I miss being up there at City Council. Miss it tremendously, and that, along with just wanting to help the city, help people. That's always been. I've had a life of customer service, and this taking a little bit of a break the last couple of years I've refocused and said I'm ready to get back into this.
Okay, you said taking a little break. Obviously, the break came from
right.
A very challenging moment in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just dive in there.
Sure, that always seems to be the number one topic for me, right. But that's okay. That's quite all right.
Right. Well, obviously the DWI, hit and run, the video of you, that precipitated the end of your time on city council. So what do you have to say to voters who look at that and say, hey, is this the person to be leading our city as mayor?
Well, let me first address that. That was not that was not the worst day of my life. My worst day was when I lost my dad, and this was my second worst day. And this really, it was tough. I mean, it was like driving off the end of the cliff. I don't know. I don't remember a thing about that night. Next thing I remember was getting woken up by the telephone ringing like crazy in the morning by everybody in the world, and I didn't know what happened, and it was a shock to me, and it was just it was a horrible mistake that I made. I've paid for that mistake in more ways than one. But looking back at that, I've been forgiven by God. I've been forgiven by my family. I've been forgiven by tons of folks around San Antonio, and I've been forgiven by the young man that I hit. So I feel redeemed in that sense. When you look at that, and I've had numerous people coming up to me saying, Clayton, everybody makes mistakes. That's not the end of the world. You can recover. Nobody's perfect. It's that kind of encouragement that has been part of the impetus for me to run again as well. I mean, the outpouring of support that I've gotten over the last couple of years and right after the incident has been uplifting. And it's really how you recover from something like that. I could have drifted away and gone into a hole and never resurfaced again, but I decided not to do that. I decided to re-engage and stay interested and stay engaged in city politics and helping out wherever I could. And again, that was not the worst day, but the second worst day in my life was with that incident. And I've asked for forgiveness. I've received that. Will everybody look at that and give me forgiveness? Probably not. A lot of people may not even vote for me because of that, but I know there's a lot of people that have forgiven me and has encouraged me to do this. So a good friend of mine just recently came up to me And he was being very, very sincere. He said, Clayton, you know, looking at those people that are still pretty nasty to me about this incident, he said, don't worry about it, because for those people, if you can't give grace and forgiveness, how can you receive it? And you know, I thought about that a lot, and I'm moving on. Sure, I totally get it that people, you know, can't get over that, but it's not the end of my life. It's not the end of my career. And let me tell you, San Antonio has a problem with drinking and driving, and there's a lot of people that has happened to here in San Antonio, and people have come up to me saying, Clayton, again, it's not the end of the world. It happened to me. I've recovered. I'm getting on with my life, learned my lesson, and I certainly have learned my lesson. So that gives me the reassurance that, you know, I can still be a productive member of this society, and more importantly, a productive member of this city and helping this city.
Do you still drink?
No.
100% sober?
Yep.
How long?
Well, actually, since that incident, yeah.
You want to share a little bit about the steps you've taken to maintain sobriety, what you do?
Well, I did go into a recovery center, the San Antonio Recovery Center, and spent time there and went through that system, and a lot of praying. And you know, I was at a crossroads in my life to, you know, make some serious changes and move on, or, you know, continue to make those kinds of mistakes. And I made that decision along with my family that, hey, this is something that I learned my lesson, and I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah. And just to give some context, I'm not asking that to delve too much into your personal life, but there are going to be voters who will want to know, okay, one, are you sober? And two, what are you doing to maintain that, right? So that's the question.
Yeah,
that's your chance to answer them.
Yeah, yes I am, and you know, I just quit. It's that simple. Just quit.
Anything else ongoing, like you mentioned before,
no,
like AA,
nope,
counseling?
Nope,
nothing. Okay.
I've done it, and feel good about it, and you know, I'm a new Clayton, if you will, and that makes me feel good. After that, I started, after I got through that process, I started going to the gym and working out 3 times a week, played tennis every day of the week, and been keeping that regimen until this campaign started, which I'm not doing the tennis thing and the working out as much as I'd like to.
Okay. You served in the Air Force, right?
Yes.
You were an engineer?
Yes, civil engineer for 21 years.
Great. What do you think is the most important issue that San Antonio faces? If you had to choose one issue, what would it be?
Well, number one, I think our crime issue is the number one issue here for the city. There's a lot of different issues that kind of tie into each other, but right now that seems to be the number one topic. And everybody that I talk to, and I ask that question also, what's the number one issue that you see here in San Antonio? And they say the crime. They don't feel safe even walking in their neighborhoods in the evening. They don't feel safe. And that, to me, we have to turn that around. That is our number one responsibility is for folks that live here in San Antonio, their safety and security.
You know, it's interesting that it doesn't surprise me that that's what you're hearing, but we just ran a story a couple months ago, I think, that crime is down in San Antonio. You know, Chief McManus said that. There's a SAPD report. So crime is the number one issue, but it's maybe the perception of it is not as.
Well, I think there's a couple of sides to that. Perception, yes, maybe perception, and I'm concerned about this, that crime is down. people come up to me and say, Clayton, my car was just broken into, but I didn't even report it because, number one, the police don't show up right away. They take a report and then they don't hear back from them anymore. It's that simple, that you have a lot of crime in this city that's not even being reported because there's a lack of action on people's part. That's what they feel. And so to say that crime is down, I'm not so sure that that's the case. That's me speaking, and I have not talked to the chief about it. I know they keep records and statistics about crime all over the city, but what I'm getting is just the opposite, that crime is up, people are scared, and they want something done about it.
I can keep going unless y'all want to jump in.
Okay, so what's number 2?
Number 2, my top 3 has always been, since my first election, has always been safety and security, infrastructure, and property taxes. I'm proud that when I got on council, it took me 3 years to get the homestead exemption, but I got it through and got it passed to start the homestead exemption, and then get it raised to the 10%, and then finally the 20%. So I'm very proud of that fact. The crime, I was able to get 200 additional police officers on the streets during my time. And then finally, the infrastructure portion, I was able to double the infrastructure projects. We were spending about $60 million a year when I first came on council, and got that bumped up to $120 million. We've got over 4,000 miles of streets here in San Antonio, and a good portion of them have failed and need to totally be redone. People are paying a lot of taxes here in San Antonio, and they expect a return on their investment. And one of those areas is our infrastructure. And right now we got about a $4 billion backlog in city-owned facilities. That's roads, streets, parks, buildings, all of that, $4 billion. And we've worked our way into this situation, but we got to work our way out, because in order for San Antonio to move forward, we got to take care of our baseline infrastructure that we have to date. And until that happens, we're going to continue to struggle across the city on what our priorities are. And it has far-reaching results on bringing additional business here to San Antonio. The crime situation, our infrastructure issues, our school issues. There's a lot of different issues that people look at when they decide whether they want to come to San Antonio or not. So all that wrapped together, we need to re-emphasize what we're spending our tax dollars on to help with our bringing in of additional businesses and supporting our existing businesses here in town, which is so very important here. And we're not, we're still at 18% poverty rate here in town. It was the same thing 50 years ago, 18%. So what is that meaning? We're not making progress here in San Antonio. We're still listed as the poorest large city in the United States. We have to get out of that vicious cycle, and part of that is the amount of debt that we're continuing to put on ourselves here, chasing the shiny things here in town, and we need to concentrate on our base and get that straightened out so that we can continue to move forward. Until we take care of our base issues here, we will continue to struggle.
Do you think the city's Ready to Work program should continue then?
Oh, absolutely not. That thing has been a disaster. And I was on an interview the other day, and hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. That was a program that was doomed to failure. There was no way that we were going to train up 40,000, and that's what was originally promised, 40,000 people, primarily going into the tech industry. for $150 million at the time. That's what it was sold as. Well, they moved the goalpost and reduced it down to $15,000. And, oh, by the way, our sales tax revenue was doing better, and they were estimating up to $250 million. So less than half, but almost doubling the amount of money going into that program. And it has been a miserable failure. It has not worked. We created this huge bureaucracy again in trying to execute a program that just was not going to work.
What would you do with those funds?
Well, I think a better way to use those funds would be to go directly to industry, such as construction industry, and actually pay for labor. In other words, pay for internships or what have you to get those people onto those jobs and learn those trades and get them into those companies. Basically giving the companies free labor, but getting them trained up into those jobs. And I think that would be a much better return on investment than what we're getting now. Classroom training and that is all good, but let's face it, we need skilled construction workers. We need electricians. We need welders. We need pipe fitters. We need all of that to keep San Antonio moving forward. Again, this with concentrating on the tech industry did not wash out, and right now we're continuing to spend a lot of money on people's salaries that are executing this program, but we're not getting a lot of benefit from it.
What about pre-K for SA?
Pre-K for SA, I've not supported that in the past, and again, this is, I'm looking like, what's the return on investment? We're spending about $50 million a year for about 2,000 students. It's not everybody can get into that. It's just a small portion. And now our public school system is actually offering that as well. So the city started this school system totally separate from the public school system or private school systems. We got our own city school system, which we have put a lot of money into. And again, are we getting our bigger bang for the buck with that $50 million a year? I think one of the issues that I've seen some reports, this has been a while back, that once the kids matriculate back into another school, that they will lose that advantage that they got at pre-K, and by the 3rd and 4th grade that they will be back down to the same level again where the other children are. So that concerns me. I don't think there's been any conclusive evidence that they're going to continue to be at the top of their classes when they go through the whole system. But again, it's just for a small minority of kids here in San Antonio that we're trying to provide those services for. And now this public school system offer it. Why are we still spending $50 million a year for that?
So it's mayor for child living on the west side in poverty, child living on the east side in poverty.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do? What are the policies that you will advocate that will stop that cycle of poverty we just stated 18%?
Well, I think the city can offer additional help and services to the school districts. One of the things that happened when my first term, we had a meeting with all the superintendents here in town, and just to talk about stuff. That meeting happened one time.
That was during COVID, right?
No. This was back in 2018, I think, where we gathered. We had like 13 superintendents all in the same room, and that conversation unfortunately just devolved into, well, the state's not giving us enough money, and it didn't really get.
True.
Well, that's true. It's true, but it really, what I wanted it to work into is what else can San Antonio do for you to help you in educating our kids. And I've been to a lot of different schools on the south, east, and west side, and it's terrible. Just the built environment at some of these places is terrible. The streets leading up to the schools, the sidewalks, the fencing, all of that stuff. The city needs to step up and help reinvigorate these areas with new streets, new sidewalks, lighting, good street lighting, all of those things to at least make it look nicer for kids to want to go to school. What happens inside that fence line, though, is really up to the schools, the school districts, but the city can play a part in that, in the built environment. I'm an engineer, and I look at that kind of thing, and that's what I think would help a lot by the city stepping up and doing something for the school districts also to help in those areas, because right now, even the streets and the sidewalks and everything going up to these schools are horrible, and they need to be fixed, and that's the city's responsibility.
If I recall, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, as a council member, you did support equity budgeting.
Yes.
Yeah. So as a mayor, you would still support equity budgeting.
Yeah. There's, this that's been bantered around a lot about what's equity, and there are some parts in town that have been neglected, and yes, we need to go in there and fix that infrastructure on what has lagged behind for many, many years. And unfortunately, again, that's part of what I was talking about before. We had this huge backlog of infrastructure costs, and we have to start working on that. And that's primarily in those south, east, and west sides that we have these horrible streets and utilities and things like that we need to put the money in there to fix those. And that's what's dragging San Antonio down in those areas that have been neglected for many years.
Should the city help contribute toward a Spurs arena? Should it help fund that?
I was wondering when you were going to get into that.
Well,
but yeah, here's my concern: is what is the city going to get out of that deal? I don't think the county gets much out of the arena where it's at right now. Most of all the proceeds go to the Spurs, if not all. So we need to take a look at that. And when whoever is making the deal, whoever is working these deals between the Spurs and the city needs to get something out of it. What's our return on investment? Just moving that arena from where it's at now to downtown, is that really going to spur more economic development, or is it just going to take it from one part of town and put it in another that we're not going to get any additional revenue from? So that's my concern. And what does the city get out of it? And how much debt is that going to add to our already highest debt per capita here in Texas?
But if you had to say yes or no, you're the mayor. Yes, the city has a role in a new arena, or no. Like, based on what you know right now, you've got to make a call.
Yeah, I would say yes, the city has a role to play.
Right. So some public funding.
Some sort of, now there's a lot of different funding streams that they're looking at.
Yes.
And part of the problem is they haven't really come out and said yet, okay, this is how much of this, and this is how much of that, and this is how much public funding we need. I have a problem with public funding on this thing. Until I can see what those breakouts are and what the return on investment for San Antonio is. And I'm not talking about, are we really going to get additional revenue from this arena being relocated downtown, additional revenue to make it worth spending public funds to move it?
What if it's the difference between the Spurs playing here or playing in Austin?
Well, we don't know that. We don't know that. Hey, we could build this brand new arena and they move anyway.
I guess.
Yeah, when you look at it, they could move anyway.
Campaign and they would contribute toward it, right? So, but I appreciate the point, but yeah. So I guess another way to word it would be, as a mayoral candidate, how seriously do you take the concern, if you can view it as a concern, that the Spurs could move if there's not a new arena?
I would look at that with great concern. I mean, let's face it, we built Alamo Dome to get an NFL team. Did that ever happen? No. We built a soccer stadium that we were supposed to get a major league soccer team here. Did that happen?
Well,
no.
Gordon built the soccer stadium.
Well, but we now own that.
Yes, city county.
And we were going to expand it to bring on this major league soccer team. Well, we couldn't even get a major league soccer team. We will never get a major league baseball team here. And it's because of San Antonio and where we are economically and physically. You know, will Dallas and Houston allow us to get an NFL team or Major League Baseball? I don't think so. They want these fans here in San Antonio. So I don't think they will ever say yes to those teams here in San Antonio. So what do we have left? We have these Spurs. That's the only major league team that we have here in San Antonio. So yes, I think it's very important to keep the Spurs here. Will they move if a new arena is not built? I don't know. Would they move even if we built a new arena? I don't know that either. You know, that's all conjecture of what could happen in the future. And I don't like to speculate. I don't like to try to read the tea leaves to figure something like that out. Those are owned by a group of individuals that they're in it for a profit. They want to make money. And you know, and it gets back to what I was saying before, we got this 18% poverty rate. And we don't have a lot of anchor large businesses anymore. I mean, look at it. We can't seem to get any of these large corporations in here to help support, you know, the boxes and things like that here in a major league franchise. So, you know, all this stuff plays together. It's a, you know, it's a big whirlpool, and all this stuff is swirling together, and you can't just pick out bits and pieces. You have to look at the whole picture on how everything works together on these things.
The lack of, you referenced the lack of information out there for the rest of us to know, and lack of transparency we covered extensively here. How would you handle it differently?
Oh, absolutely. You know, what really got me was all of a sudden, bam, we saw these big pretty pictures about downtown being redeveloped in this Project Marble. I didn't know who's been working on this, who started this, who paid for it, you know, all of that. And, you know, again, it was a lack of transparency. That should have started at the grassroots with community meetings. You got communities right now that's upset like all get out about this right now, because they didn't start at the community level to start that discussion and start talking about whether this was a good idea to do or not. And I know there's some communities really upset with this whole thing right now because they weren't brought in at the beginning to voice their wants and desires and concerns. And so now we find ourselves, man, that thing has been laid out, still don't have the funding business straightened out, but all this stuff is swirling. My big issue was the transparency at the very beginning. Where was it? Where was this being worked at? Where was this being put together at? You know, why wasn't this put out a year ago? I mean, a year ago. That just didn't happen overnight like that. That took some planning, a lot of you know, paperwork and laying this thing out. So I got a big issue with how this was even started here in San Antonio without bringing the community into it. And I would certainly not do it that way. I would start at that grassroots level. If somebody's got a great idea for San Antonio, Let's flesh it out at the grassroots level first before we go and just unveil this big, massive plan. You know, who knows how much it's going to cost. I've heard anywhere upwards of $7 billion for all of that to be done downtown. And so, yeah, I'm very, very disappointed on how this was rolled out.
Switching topics here. So the mayor is, you know, by virtue of being the mayor, I forget what the word, the phrase is, but a board member oversaws, as well as CPS.
Yes.
So they had there's this, you know, this thing that's happening up in Guadalupe Ranch on the northwest side, far northwest side. Do you think that San Antonio, as a city, as Bexar County, as a county, is doing enough to safeguard the city's water supply, the Edwards Aquifer, Trinity Aquifer? Or do you think what's going up in Guadalupe Ranch, you think it's a good idea or is it a bad idea?
Well, look, there's development that's going to continue to happen here in San Antonio and around San Antonio. And yes, all that needs to come together in protecting our water supply. The aquifer, you know, we're set at limits. You know, we can't go over those limits to keep the springs flowing in San Marcos. So that's not going to change. What can change is, you know, we did the Vista Ridge, the pipeline from Burleson County here, 42 miles of pipeline carrying water here. That was a big help. We have the ASR down on the south side, on where we're treating this brinish water, brackish water, and putting that into our system. I think we have a lot of potential for that water to expand that. That's basically putting additional package units out there to treat more water. And I think that should be the direction that we go in here in the future. We got that huge ASR that can store water, our total water needs for a year. And so we need to expand on that and expand on that water down in Wilson County that is brackish water that we can treat and put directly into our system here. So we need to expand on that. Bring in water from other parts of the state. You know, that's part of a state issue that they were funded with this constitutional amendment here this last year, where they put X billions of dollars into it to look at a water supply statewide. So that's going to happen in the future, but I think we need to continue to protect our aquifer. Development is going to keep happening here. So we need to find other ways that we can continue to develop water resources.
Well, in Guadalupe Ranch, the issue is they're going to discharge water into the Lotus Creek, and the concern is that where it sits in the karst is going to actually send that treated wastewater directly into the aquifer that people drink from. And do you think that should be stopped, or do you think that's no?
Well, again, it's all part of the development issue. You know, are we going to continue to develop here in San Antonio, in this region, and in this county, or are we going to stop those developments? I didn't do it. I took a tour of the South wastewater treatment plant, and they say that water is safe to drink. And they gave us all a cup, and they said, "Do you want to go drink that water?" I did not. I just couldn't get myself to do it. But being a plumber's son, I should have been able to walk right up there and say yes. And there are cities around the U.S. today that are recycling and reusing for drinking purposes wastewater treatment plant water. So Texas is a semi-arid state.
What's coming out of Guadalupe Ranch is not going to be advanced purification. It's going to be a package plant.
It's going to be but what they're saying is the filtration process, what we have.
Right, but that's the whole issue, is that because it's going over a karst aquifer, it won't be filtered. It'll just shoot straight into the aquifer.
Well, if they can show a treatment that brings it up to drinking water standards, which we're doing today, San Antonio.
Go out and look at-
Yes, yeah.
So unless they can bring that discharge to drinking water standards, it should not be discharged.
I would say yes. I would say yes.
It
Not
should not discharge.
should not.
into Lotus Creek.
You're right. And I look, the aquifer is not just for San Antonio. It's for many other people across this whole region. I'm more on the protective side, in which, and gets back to this Ready to Work program, I was dead set against using that money for Ready to Work. We should have kept using that money for protecting our aquifer here. And
But there are still, I mean, there's still aquifer protection funds happening, right?
to a much smaller extent. I would have rather been using that money for the aquifer protection than what we're using it for now.
Okay. When you're on council, there are a lot of votes that were 10 to 1, 9 to 2.
Mhm.
So if you're mayor, how do you get to, you need 6, right? So,
Yes.
So there were a lot of like, as council members, a lot of like sticking your flag in the sand, like making my principled stand. I'm a sole conservative, but you can't sit
No.
as mayor like that.
The mayor has to provide that leadership and be the cheerleader for San Antonio. Can't just say, hey, this is what we're going to do, and force all his or hers policy on the rest of the council. You have to be able to show that leadership and work with the rest of the council, sitting down with them and making sure that their requirements are being taken care of and the city's requirements are being taken care of. So, each district isn't a standalone city. It's all part of San Antonio. So that's how we need to do, is provide that leadership in persuading them on these are the issues that's important to the city, and get them to sign on to those, and then move forward. You got to be a cheerleader. You got to be that leader to make that happen. And I will say that's not really what happened in the past when I was on council. It was all of a sudden, here's this vote, or here's this policy we're going to vote on without any conversation with myself. I don't know if that.
You're saying Ron wouldn't meet with you?
Yeah. So that would not happen with me. I didn't get to be a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force or a vice president in a large engineering construction firm without those leadership qualities. And that's what I would be using in leading the city.
Going back to the utilities, so CPS on the other side, CPS has in the recent years produced more electricity than the city uses, so it sells it, and it's had some surpluses. What do you think those surpluses should be used with? Should they be rebated to ratepayers, or should they be used to, further transmission line infrastructure, further power generation, whether renewables or traditional fossil fuel plants?
Yeah, well, those surpluses are going to probably be dwindling here in the future, because we don't have that surplus power with us shutting down these coal plants. And yes, conversion to gas plants, that's great. But as far as having a total surplus that we can sell during those peak times to ERCOT, we're probably not going to be having those kind of surpluses in the future. What we've done in the past is we've taken that money and kind of held that to the end of the budget season, and all the councilmen fight over that to get their special projects funded. That was, in looking back at that was short-sighted. I think we should have had more structured policies on where that money would go to. look, we don't, right now we have these data centers that are wanting to move into San Antonio. And the problem is not having the power for them, but it's the distribution. We've got choke points around San Antonio on how to get the power from one part to the other. And that is very, very expensive to upgrade and provide those sources of transmission to get that power to these big, high users. That's something that needs to be prioritized.
So transmission is where you think.
Yes. And this is on any industry, any city, anywhere that has a budget. First you have to identify what are your requirements. What are the requirements? And then you look at what resources you have to fill those requirements. And you're never, ever going to have all the resources you need to fill those requirements. And that's where it takes the leadership to sit down and prioritize. What do you want to work on first, second, third, and until those resources are exhausted. But I don't think we've done a very good job in doing that in the past. Again, we've kind of flitted that money away in different areas for CPS, and that's a shame. That we should have been better prepared and been laying this out so it's clear as to what the priorities should be and how we use that money going forward on those surpluses.
I just want to jump in. You'd earlier mentioned coal power, so the shuttering of the spruce plants in particular. Did you do you now oppose the closure of the spruce 1 and 2 plants?
Yeah, we still got another 25 years left on the plant life there. That's money that we've spent to build, and now we're shuttering it before it needs to be shuttered. So absolutely, to me, that's taking away one of our assets again that we could be using for another 25 years out there.
What about the emissions from that plant?
Well, when you talk about the emissions, and this gets very complicated, the emissions from that coal plant are not that dirty. They have been cleaned up a lot over the years. And then on top of that, we have one monitor here in San Antonio that puts us into this, and it's up at Camp Bullis, puts us into this non-attained, where's that coming from? Camp Bullis? It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's transportable. That's the bad stuff coming from other portions of the state and knocking us off if we could get rid of that particular monitoring station, we'd be scot-free or move it to a different location. We're doing great here in San Antonio on our emissions. We would not be in non-attainment. In fact, that's one thing that when I become mayor, I am going to surface that issue again, that we were, TCEQ supported San Antonio, that we were meeting our emissions requirements here, and we were not in this non-attainment. It was because of that one monitor. And the EPA is so intransigent and so knuckleheaded that they wouldn't move it or work with us on what is really going on here in San Antonio. This is transportable issues coming into San Antonio. We're not creating the issue here. So I, as mayor, would resurface that issue, go back to the EPA saying TCEQ supports us here in the state. Why are you creating additional issues here for San Antonio and putting us in this non-attainment? And it's going to cost additional money for everybody here in San Antonio and the monitoring and all that kind of stuff that we wouldn't have to be doing, because it makes, to me, it makes common sense. It makes common sense. And what they're doing is not common sense, what they're doing to us.
I think you had said you had 3 top issues. Might have missed one. You had crime, infrastructure, and property taxes. Was that
Yes.
the third one?
Those were the three.
Oh.
Yes, yes.
The infrastructure and property taxes, 2 and 3.
Yeah, that's two separate issues. The property taxes, and I got the homestead exemption started and then got it raised up to maximum. The infrastructure, we're still woefully behind in funding our infrastructure. And then the crime and that issue. I got the 200 additional police officers while I was on council. But then I looked at it, I said, well, what are our numbers based on? At the time I think it was like 2,500. What is that 2,500 based on? And nobody really knew. They would just be adding additional police officers over time. But there was no data or nothing tying those numbers into what our authorized strength was. So based on that, we had a study performed by UTSA to determine what our numbers should be here in San Antonio, based on response times, amount of crime, compared to other cities, so on and so forth. And come to find out, we're still 350 officers short here in San Antonio. And that's going to be my number one priority, is to get those authorizations filled and get us up to the right numbers that we should have here in San Antonio, and be more of a proactive police force instead of a reactive police force. Again, what's happening now, something happens out in the community, they respond, they take a report, and that's it. I want to get patrols out there on the streets and flip this 60-40 rule. I don't know if y'all are familiar with that, but basically 60% of our force are not on patrolling out in San Antonio. Only 40% are. Eric has started this process trying to flip that number, whereas 60% of our officers are on patrol in the community and 40% aren't. So I applaud that, but we need to get the rest of those authorizations filled.
Related to public safety, and this dates back to the Cheryl Scully era. What are your thoughts on capping public safety, police and fire, spending at 2/3 of the general fund?
Well, I don't know where that 2/3 came from. That was a number that was pulled out of the air. And today, we're not at 2/3. We're at like 61%. So that number has continually gone down. It used to be closer to 66%, but now it's down to around 61. So we have room in there. We have room in there to grow our police force and firefighters across San Antonio. So I don't have a problem on keeping that 66% as a cap, but again, that was a number pulled out of the air. There's nothing saying that we can't go above that. And right now, looking at where we're at and people not feeling safe in this city, I don't have a problem with going over that 66%.
Are you satisfied with Eric Walsh's performance as city manager? Do you have any?
Yeah, I was on council when we hired him.
Any issues with his pay?
Well,
Do you support the?
I voted against every one of those charter amendments.
Right.
Against every one of them. Eric Walsh knew what the ground rules were when he took that job. He knew that there was term limits and he knew there was a salary cap, but he still applied. And in my thinking, we didn't even let that system go one whole cycle. We changed it before it got up to the end of his term. But Eric is doing a good job. It's very, very difficult, if he wasn't doing a good job, to remove a city manager. You got to have 6 votes to do that, and it's very hard to do. So I was in favor of the term limits, and I was in favor of the salary cap. And there's no doubt in my mind that at the end of Eric's term, we would have had somebody else stepping up to the plate that was a first-class city manager to be hired.
I'm going to go through a couple of questions on the survey that I'll give this to you to fill out, but
Sure.
It's good that we haven't hit, if y'all are okay with that. So One is on abortion travel. In light of Texas's near total abortion ban, should the city fund, either directly or indirectly, travel to other places where a woman could receive an abortion?
No.
And again, I'll have you fill this out. Curious to hear how closely this sentence maybe aligns with your view. The city is not cooperating enough with the Trump administration on immigration. The city is not cooperating enough.
Correct.
Okay. Do you agree with Governor Greg Abbott and Texas legislature's efforts to curb the power of local governments?
No.
No. And who was the most effective mayor in San Antonio?
Who?
Yeah, you can name one mayor.
Phil Hardberger.
Phil Hardberger. You want to explain why, Phil?
You know, when he was first running and when he got elected, I could see that he had this like calm demeanor, and he was a little bit older. He had that kind of like grandfather atmosphere about him, that he was able to lead in working with the other council folks. There was not this division that has been taking place over the last number of years. Things seemed to be going smoother when he was in there, and I think it had to do with him being able to work with the other council folks and persuading them with his leadership abilities to see it his way and vote along with him. And we had a lot of votes that were, you know, everybody agreeing. They're not 100%, and you'll never get to that point, but I think he did a great job in that vein.
Didn't he leave office with like 80% approval or something like that?
Yeah, it was high. Yeah, and again, I'll look at that saying, this council needs some adult leadership, and I'm a little bit older.
How adult are you?
I am 69 years old.
Okay.
69 years
no
old.
Birthday between now and the election.
No.
Okay. 69.
It's in October, so you know, I got the gray hair to prove my adultness, if you will. But I think there's something to be said for that. And that was, I really respected Mayor Hardberger and what he did and the position that he left San Antonio, not where he started, but where he left San Antonio. I think was in a great position, had some great ideas, and got a lot of things done while he was in office. And that's why you had such a high approval rating, because he had a steady hand, didn't have knee-jerk reactions, and we've had a lot of knee-jerk reactions here in San Antonio since he's been gone. And you know, I just really admired him for what he did and how he did it here in San Antonio.